Hello class. This video is about the article Feeding Egos and Tending Wounds, Deference and Disaffection in Women's Emotional Labor by Sandra Bartky. First, a little bit about her. Sandra Lee Bartky lived from 1935 to 2016, and she was a professor of philosophy at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Here's an interesting bit. Sandra Bartky was a founding member of the Society for Women in Philosophy from its formation in Chicago in 1971. Here's a picture of Bartky and her most famous book, Femininity and Domination, Studies in the Phenomenology of Oppression. And the article we are reading is an excerpt from this book, which came out in 1990. You can tell us if you think it's still relevant today. Okay. I have a reader's guide for you. This is a long article. I think you should be able to follow her argument, but it is a lot of words. So here's a summary for you. Okay, here we go. Introduction. So this is part 1 through part 7. You can see in the article that she has these little Roman numerals for her sections. So I used those. Okay, introduction. This is my summary of the article. Women give more emotional caregiving than they get back from men. This is similar to the exploitation of workers in capitalism. 2. On the nature of female caregiving. Quote, feeding egos and nursing wounds. 3. Women are harmed and men benefit from women's nurturing. 4. Women's caregiving role signals that they have lower status in society than men. 5. This nurturing role is epistemically and ethically disempowering. Women are compromised in their knowledge and compromised morally by this caregiving role. 6. Ironically, women may feel powerful and love the role of nurturer. See Bartky's thesis, bottom of page 115. We'll get to that. Conclusion. The analogy with Marxist theory of exploitation is more or less right. Conservatives are wrong to say it's a fair deal. Traditional roles of men and women. And we should be careful about adopting an ethics of care, which is one of the forms of feminist ethics. Okay, so that's your quick summary. Let's look at a few key passages in the article. I am going to go down to page 109. Okay, you might turn to page 109 too. Bartky has some excellent description of women's caregiving behavior. And of course, you can decide whether you think she's right. Here's a nice passage right here. So this is page 109, about 10 lines down. Consider once again the bodily displays that are typical of women's intimate caregiving. The sympathetic cocking of the head, the forward inclination of the body, the frequent smiling, the urging through appropriate vocalizations that the man continue his recital, hence that he may have to continue to commandeer the woman's time and attention. So, this is her feminist critique of women's caregiving behavior and the sexism that underlies it. I'm going to go to page 110. You should write on your copy little stars for lines that you think are interesting, or that you disagree with, or that you agree with. Okay, page 110. I have to find my spot. Okay, so this is around the middle of page 110. So here's the spot that I want to read from right here. Women sometimes demand the performance of ritualized gestures of concern from men. The remembering of a birthday or anniversary, a Valentine's Day card, as signs of a male caring that appears to be absent from the transactions of everyday life. So remember, she's arguing that women are giving more care to men than they're getting back. The ferocity with which women insist on these ritual observations is a measure, I believe, of our sense of deprivation, writes Bartky. I'm going to go down to page 115. Oh, actually 113. So she keeps coming back to this theme. Bottom of page 113. Men get the benefits, women run the risks. So this is a big part of her argument, that women's caregiving in intimate relationships is unfair. Men get the benefits, women run the risks. I'm going to go down to page 115. Near the bottom of page 115, you can see a kind of summary of much of her argument right around here. The woman who provides a man with largely unreciprocated emotional sustenance accords him status and pays him homage. She agrees to the unspoken proposition that his doings are important enough to deserve substantially more attention than her own. But even as the man's supremacy in the relationship is tacitly assumed by both parties to the transaction, the man reveals himself to his caregiver as vulnerable and insecure. And while she may well be ethically and epistemically disempowered by the care she gives, this caregiving affords her the feeling that a mighty power resides within her being. Okay, so there's a passage that I thought was great. So I'm going to go back to the top. So how does this fit in? How does this article fit in with what we're doing? I think there's a strong connection with virtue ethics here. So being nurturing, being caring, caregiving behavior, being nurturing is a virtue. But according to Bartky's feminist analysis, we have to think about that virtue in the context of sexism and a male-dominated society. So within patriarchy, that virtue, well, what do you think? So it's a kind of virtue ethics. It's talking about virtues and qualities of people. It's not talking about rules, principles, that sort of thing. All right. So for feminist ethics, in intimate relations, which is Bartky's focus, we need to think about gender roles. We need to think about sexism. And so for a scenario that involves intimate relationships, we have to consider gender, according to Bartky and many other feminists in ethics. All right. So, as my last comment, you might think about the story of Aziz Ansari, and you might think about cat person. And you should ask yourself, based on Bartky's analysis of women's caregiving and these dynamics and relationships between men and women, what would Bartky say about what happened with Aziz Ansari and Grace? What would Bartky say about what happened in the story Cat Person between Robert and Margot?